I want to welcome you again. I'm Dr. Lisa Wisotsky. I'm president of the Rotary Club of Englewood in District 7490. And it is my privilege to introduce our speakers today. Dr. Herman Schaefer is a member of the Rotary Club of Bonsu Bad Godesberg. He is a German historian and founding president of the House of History Foundation of the Federal Republic of Germany, one of the most significant and popular museums in Germany. He is an adjunct professor at the University of Freiburg and an honorary professor at the University of Karlsruhe. He is a recipient of many national and international history awards. Wilfried Gehart is a founding member of the Rotary Club of Mendingen. He has served as governor of District 1930 and as a district trainer. He worked in the field of mechanical engineering for more than 40 years, and too has been a participant in the research project that we are going to learn about. I now hand over the floor, so to speak, to Dr. Schaefer and William Gehart.
Thank you, Lisa. I hope you can hear me well now. I want to thank you, a very warm welcome from good old Europe, and a big thank you to Rotary International President Holger, said he really tried hard and sent his a very nice message to us. And naturally, another big thanks to President Lisa for organizing this session, to invite us to give this presentation, and last but not least, for the very kind introduction of the speakers. I would really love to say much more greetings and thanks, but Lisa, you have presented us with the challenge of compressing 90 years of history into 30 minutes, and we are already 30 minutes late, so basically no time is left. So let's start immediately with the questions of what motivate the 60 Rotarians in our working group to spend so much time and effort to work on this job. And I hope you can all see now my presentation in the full screen. And there is this question of what is really driving us, and these basic questions we are focusing on is when a state disregards its democratic rights and humanistic principles, how is Rotary reacting? Then the second case is if such a state returns to democratic rules like we did in Germany and in many other countries, what can we do with the supporters of the old regime? Should we invite them again? Should we renounce them? Second question is naturally, what can we learn from the history of Rotary in Germany for our future? And third, but not least and last, how can we Rotarians ask forgiveness of all victims and their beloved ones whom we have betrayed and discredited in this dark time? We have built up this little presentation on 5 chapters. The Rotary under the rule of National Socialism will be as a keynote, and which will be held now by our friend Professor Herman Schaefer. Herman, may I please hand over the micro to you. I switch off and keep on showing the slides.
Thank you, Wilfried, and my many thanks to Lisa for organizing all this. So what you see here, distinguished Rotarians as they looked in the 30s. This is the official picture of the district conference in Wiesbaden, Germany in 1935, as we saw this event up to 2017. For more than 70 years, this photo was presented to us as the official photo of this conference. The reality was much different. We are speaking of a painful past, and this is a painful picture. You will never forget it. And we found this original only a few years ago in the context of our archival researches. The role of victims was claimed by many Rotarians after the Second World War and until recently. And now this role could no longer be maintained, as the editor wrote in our magazine in September 19, not earlier, 19. And by the way, we are still and eager to find out when this falsification was made and who falsified it, but unfortunately, we were not yet able to find it. Some key data. To remind you, I'll make it very short. You know about the foundation, you know about the first German European club, the first German club in 27, and you may not know that there were quite a few Rotarians already at the beginning of the Third Reich. So we had at that time in Vienna even a world convention already in 31, and nearly 1,300 members in 32, and more than 40 clubs in 33. And you probably know that Hitler came to power in January 33. Here's a district map which just gives you an overview on where we had Rotarian clubs in Germany and in Austria. You see on the next picture that the swastika, as we saw it, was quite normal in events of different kinds. And sometimes you could see it even in little flags on tables in meetings. I will give you now some individual fates and examples of them. Here, Thomas Mann, who was founding member of the Munich Club, a Literature Nobel Prize, a model Rotarian, and the club and all Rotarians in Germany were very proud of his membership, and he was dismissed in a very small and unpleasant and impolite letter during a foreign trip. By the way, he became at the end of the Second World War, you know that he went to the United States, and he was in the 40s. He was invited by the club in Los Angeles to become an honorary Rotarian. Karl Wolfskehl is another example. He was well known among all Rotarians at the time because he was the editor of our magazine. He was an intellectual, an author, a poet, and he was intelligent enough to see what would come, and he fled on the day after the Reichstag fire in February 33 and never went back to Germany. And there is another example of Hugo Hauser, who was Rotarian and a renowned advocate and a notarian in Baden-Baden, a Jewish Rotarian. He was forbidden by the Nazi Germany to continue working. And the simple consequence for that, Rotary was he had no classification in the Rotarian context, and therefore he could no longer be a member of his club. And this is one of the rare photos on which you even see one of our Rotarian friends in the 30s being brought to the station and from there to concentration camp. He was killed as well as his wife. Their son, who is right in that group besides him, he was able to escape to the United States, and he came back in the war as American GI to liberate Germany. Konrad Adenauer, you know him as the first chancellor of the Federal Republic after the war. The Nazis dismissed him as Lord Mayor of Cologne, and having lost his job, he had no classification. He had to leave his club. This is a painful history. How easy it seemed for Rotarian clubs to get rid of members with a politically dissenting opinion or of an opposing attitude, or of the members with Jewish religion or Jewish ancestry. By the way, about 10 to 20% of the Rotarians were Jewish in Germany. If you ask, and this is the picture now, if you ask how Rotarian clubs reacted in 1933, well, they knew that National Socialists hated them as an international organization. They hated them as well as Freemasons, looked at them as an organization which was directed by international Jewish conspiracy. And they all knew National Socialists offended Rotary since many years. The reaction was appeasement. And here you see a leaflet of the Stuttgart Club, which explicitly offered its international relationships to the government. The example was Italy. Italian Rotarians had inaugurated Mussolini as their patron. In Germany, Rotarians thought of Hermann Göring, a prominent Nazi figure, second after Hitler, as the person who might take over this position of a patron for Rotary in Germany. And I bet if this would have come, probably we would not have Rotarians in Germany. Next picture. The discrimination of Jews started immediately after Hitler's grip to power in 1933. The clubs themselves had to decide if they kept these members or not. And here what the Zwickau Club reported. Already in April, they had no more Jewish members, and they seemed to be proud of this. Let's compare Rotarian behavior to that of Germans in general. It corresponded and was a mixture of opportunism to the new government, fear of National Socialism, and fascination of Hitler. What about resistant behavior? As for the governors, no resistance, more tactics and integration, what we found. As for the clubs, only 2 dissolved, Heidelberg and Mainz, but both less in resistance than capitulating to the hostility of the party and the government. The situation becomes more exciting when we look to individual Rotarians. I'm reporting these results of detailed archival research and biographical research in the last weeks. We have manifold individual situations. We have in Breslau club crisis in 1933 and 1936 because numerous resignated because the Jews should be thrown out. We have certain people who supported Jewish fellows. We have in Dresden a friend who was in good contact with Gördeler. I come to him later. We have in Freiburg a solidarity action for an expelled member, Tannhauser, who went to the United States. We have in Cologne a banker who supported Adenauer. We have in Mannheim a lawyer who helped persecuted persons to emigrate. And we have in Munich, for example, a commemoration of a dead Jewish founding member who was expelled. These are acts of little kinds of resistance. And we have in Stuttgart, for example, an American citizen who's a liaison man to the Robert Bosch resistance group. And we have in Leipzig a general consul of the United States who supported Gördeler. And we have Ewald Löser, the deputy of Gördeler, who supported him also. But the most important figure, if you look to resistance in Germany, is Karl Gördeler, who was Lord Mayor in Leipzig. He was invited several times by the Leipzig club to become member, but he only became member after he had resigned from his position as Lord Mayor. and he was invited to become an honorary member then. He was and is still the pride of the Leipzig Club and of Rotarians in Germany if they speak about resistance. But his key role in resistance generally justifies this much more than his actual cooperation in the club, because he was, after he became honorary member, he was many months, he was on world traveling, he was also in the United States. So the conclusion of that is resistance and resistant behavior hardly formed before the World War, but with its duration. He's a very interesting personality, but I can't go into details here. So as for the situation in 1936, it became different, because after the Olympic Games, which were a very prestigious event for Hitler, the dictator started a new phase in his foreign policy, less diplomatic, more offensive. Hitler steered our country into the world and the world into the World War. And in 1937, Rotarian membership was forbidden for state employees and for party members. And losing them meant that the clubs could no longer exist. Their consequence in October 1937, self-dissolution. And now we come to another chapter of our unpleasant history. What was the attitude of Rotary International? We did a research in Evanston. We know that 4 Rotary International presidents visited Germany, and they there were gestures of appreciation towards the state and the government. But the state and the government restrained toward RE. They had no meetings with the world president. So the conclusion is preservation of clubs was more important than the protection of Jewish members. And the research in Evanston shows a memorandum of 1937, which is uncovering. The conclusion, Rotary International expected more integration into the system of the Nazi government in Germany. And the quotation there says, if Rotarians in Germany had integrated more into the general scheme of things, they would not have to disband their clubs. We are speaking of a painful past, and there is apparently a first guilt. I spoke about this, and here is the result of our research in numbers. I come to the next slide, which shows you that we had altogether nearly 1,300 Rotarians, and more than 500 were resignated or were expelled, but nearly 700 came new to Rotary. And so there was a complete change in the membership. And of those who were expelled or resignated, we identified in our detailed archival work more than 200 as discriminated, and about 150 of them had a Jewish background. And now we are working on a digital memorial for these discriminated friends. This will be in a digital version, maybe also a book, if we find the money for publication. After the war, a new chapter begins. Friedrich von Wilpert was a very engaged Rotarian. He started to collect as many documents as he was able to. I happened to meet him as a member of my club in the early 90s. He had been already Rotarian in Danzig in the 30s. He was one of the founding members at that time. And after the war, he founded 3 clubs here in Bonn. And there, next picture, you see his publication on the history of Rotary in Germany, as well as his biography. Wilpert was very engaged and a true Rotarian, twice governor and as well as president. But he would not publish his book without the consent of the German governors, and they disagreed. They demanded that this book should not be published before the year 2000, so nearly 2 generations later. And you should be aware that this was in 63 to 65. The German Governor Council 3 times forbid to publish it because of unanimous opinion printing not opportune, warning against publication impractical. These are quotations from the correspondence of Wilpert with governors and with presidents. But you should be aware, and this is what, go back again, please. Go back a bit. Oh, to the left in the corner, there you see there is an quotation which you found at that time in many, many newspapers, because that was the year 33 when the Auschwitz process, the trials in Frankfurt began, in which guards of this concentration camp were condemned. So everybody was aware of the problem of guilt of the Germans. Now comes up the question of a second German guilt. Wilpert's publication had many mistakes, and he purely tried to justify the Rotarian attitude towards Hitler. But he had collected documents which you also may interpret as proof of the failure of the German Rotarians. And if the German governors had decided in the 60s to found, for example, a committee for the detailed research of Rotarian history, our predecessors would have been the first to clarify what had happened. They would have come to the same conclusion as the Dutch world president of Rotary International, Teenstra, wrote to Wilpert here in 64. Namely, a more hostile attitude toward the party might have made it easier for Rotarians in Germany to pass the resolution to dissolve the clubs, like only Heidelberg and Mainz, I mentioned this, did. I'm coming to conclusions, and let me first summarize how our unpleasant story continued. There were circles of friends in the wartime, but in secret, not officially. And there were first attempts, even from Konrad Adenauer after the war, to re-establish a Rotary. But RI approved only since the foundation of the Federal Republic as a democratic state that clubs should be re-established. And then we have 61, the manuscript of Wilpert, and just as a number, we had in 62 nearly 140 clubs in our republic. And now there comes a jump in 2012. There was the first time by Gidi Piper, who is out today, joined us also for this meeting. He asked the clubs in Germany if they were aware of the fate of Jewish members of German clubs. So that was one of the first attempts to find this out in a more detailed way. And in 2015, our friend Kurt Maas called up in our magazine for a thorough reappraisal of the Nazi area. And since then, we are working on that, and Wilfried will later tell more details about this. And now we have to ask ourselves about our attitude today. I did talk about the first guild in the 30s, and I explained what we have to see as a second guild in the 60s. And now it's a question of the third guild. My conviction and the conviction of my colleagues is we would have to respond to accusations if we did not research on this painful part. So it's a third guild, for example, if people are still not aware that we betrayed Jewish members, betrayed politically dissenting Rotarians. And it's a kind of a third guild. We have to ask ourselves this, if next slide. Because the German Governor Council still refused to report our attempts in the last years twice, and that there was still in our magazine, this is a quotation, Jewish members had only been expelled from individual clubs, but everything had fortunately passed peacefully. This is not the truth, and we are working on the truth. And it's another kind of a third guild, which those have to ask themselves who did that our magazine, the editors, did not support. what we did for the convention, for example. Now, still we are learning, and those of whom I'm not speaking namely now who did learn. So recently the governors decided to support our project. But up to this point, this was another very exciting but also painful story. And Wilfried Gehart will now take over and tell more about this story. Wilfried.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Your turn now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Herman, for this very brief and short story of a very long time in history. And the last story you mentioned would be really a very sad story, but I just wanted to share with you one thing that you understand why this long-term time between 60 and 2020, 15, there was such a silence. Very simple. We have prepared our research work, and we are ready to print a little booklet on it, which we'll show you later. And we offered it to the Rotary magazine, the Rotary own publishers, to print it. And again, this at this time, the National Council of German Governors denied that the Rotary own company will publish this booklet. So what was our solution? We did it ourselves. We collected money from friends, from old clubs, and printed this little booklet for ourselves. Now, this little booklet is basically only is a top of an iceberg. Behind it lies the incredible achievement of our friend, past district governor Peter Diebold, who is probably joining us right now, who has linked an almost inexhaustible amount of data to this relational databases out of the old documents from the Rotary clubs, which were taken away from the German secret police Gestapo. We have the actual club members, and we all put this together into the relational databases. And this the findings of it we can present on this homepage we have created, Rotary memorial-rotary.de, where I can invite you to visit the official site. There is a working area which is restricted, but there is a big official site which you can see, showing the project ideas, showing the blogs, the news, showing the research results, and certainly the background informations, the research group and the fundings. And there is certainly a possibility to go on this memorial site, which opens this interactive map, which we have seen before. And now you can click on each of those buttons representing a Rotary club from this time, and it opens up the details of those members whom we have found to be discriminated, like here on this example of Breslau, the Dr. Bielczowski, who was Jewish, and which he was killed as well in the concentration camps. So there is a huge database behind this, and again, please feel welcome to visit this site. Now, together with this little booklet and this interactive memorial, we felt ready to move to Hamburg to the World Convention, where we have prepared 2 events, a breakout session on the matter of what can we learn from history, and a constant exhibition in the House of Friendship, our own booth, which you can see here, where we had 2 messages. We had the interactive display, and we had our book, which we could offer to the public. We had a very good positioning right in the main entrance, and we were planning to have just a reduced staff and work in shifts on there. But I can tell you, the publicity was so enormous that we were constantly on this booth and had hundreds of most moving discussions with a lot of worldwide friends which visited us here. And the second point was this breakout session where we could win past Rotary Vice President Dean Ross to be on the auditorium. And she promised to be here today. And Dean, are you here? I can't see you. I saw you in the beginning, but I didn't find her again. I would have liked to introduce her to you here. You can see this breakout session was so well advertised that the room had to be closed because of overcapacity. And we had more than 350 people inside and maybe another 200 outside who wanted to enter. We had Diane, Mr. Kalaitis, and our friend Kurt Maas, who wrote this ice-breaking article in the Rotary magazine, and our friend Herman Schaefer did the main presentation as he did just now for you. Well, from the breakout session, you want to take something back home. And that's our conclusions we took from there. That we were well aware now and made very clear that the really powerhouse of Rotary is always the club. So it depends really there how we create our essential values of friendship, fellowship, and the community service to do our message, to do our doing good in the world. We have a four-way test which represents very well our values. And what we have is, in the case of oppression of those civil rights by dictators, by regimes, it is in the clubs, it is with our members where we have to make clear whether we can adapt those political orientations and still believe in our four-way test, or we have to retreat, as did our friends in Heidelberg, and say, no, there is a red line crossed. We cannot adapt our Rotary principles anymore to what those dictatorial governments want to do us. What was made very clear by Dean, and I would have loved that she explained it to you today again, is that there will be no really clear, hard positioning of Rotary International to a dictatorial system, as we are just too afraid that we endanger individual members in those countries. But what we can expect from Rotary International, however, I think is that they remind us again and again on what is written in our four-way test, but they leave to us the freedom to choose between adaptation or dissolution of a club and to support us to re-establish clubs. I've just here a little quote under it. You see, Rotary International was sort of not very happy about the dissolution of Heidelberg, so they kept back their permission to refound the club, and all the other clubs had to be refounded until finally Heidelberg could restart their club life again. And what we have to ask them and what we can await from Rotary International is the support against any type of discrimination of members and the support of refugees and asylum seekers. And to maintain as long as possible the promotion of all the international projects, like the youth exchange program, the Rylas programs, in one word, all what is promoting civil courage and peace. And this, my friends, I am sure after all the researches we did, is the main reason why dictatorships like the Nazis just couldn't live with Rotary. And this was the reason why I called Holger and said, hey, you have done such a wonderful move just recently with your DEI initiative, because that's exactly what we want to strengthen in the future, to make very clear that yes, Rotary has in its chapters to say we are not political, but we don't think we are political. We have to step out of this corner and take a clear position if we speak about human rights, about equity and inclusion. And this is exactly the message we will distribute, which was sent to Holger just because when we started this session right now, he wanted to support this position again against you. We see that in many countries in the world, Rotary is active, and we can see on this democracy index that there are not very many countries which are dark blue or lighter blue, and more turn red and brown. We should not stop to maintain our we should stop to maintain our efforts to keep our international relations. It's no reason to stop international activities with countries where the political system turns away from human rights. In the contrary, we get the message from those Rotary clubs there that they are hoping to get more support from us, that they are hoping to continue with youth exchange programs, also in those countries which are not blue-colored on here anymore. In the real members for this breakout session, it was amazing to see that 98% of those who placed an opinion called us to repeat this type of programs in future world conventions. The biggest criticism was that the session was badly organized because the room the convention has offered us was too small. I was very happy that I could then present Paul Harris medal to those 4 main researchers we had in the name of Dean Roth after the convention. Yeah, you have seen a lot of our work which we put together in this little booklet, and there are 2 ways how you can support us in the future. There is one way in the United States. You can purchase this book now from the, as well, I hope, present Tony Conn, who has already hopefully received the first stock, where you can buy this little booklet. As you have seen, we did not get any funding from any official side. It was all printed and produced out of our own cost. So this will give us, if you buy those books, again, the power to continue our work. And for all other countries in the world, please send me a mail directly. I have the garage full of books and can ship within days to every corner in this world. And many of those clubs who have seen our little presentation then decided within their clubs, within their funds they had in the club, said to support us with the German, in our account at the Rotary German Foundation in Düsseldorf, with a project number where we take the funds to finance our future projects. Thank you very much in the moment, and I think Herman and myself would be very happy to answer some questions if there are.